Hi, Steve here from 3D-Hub. This lesson we'll go through the basics of actually creating some 3D-Hub content. What you have already done by now is installed the various plugins for 3D Studio Max, the FXML exporter. You'd have also installed the presenter plugin for PowerPoint, which is the interface that you'll see shortly. First thing we'll do is we'll open up PowerPoint. We've got it already open here. Standard PowerPoint opening screen, and what you'll see across the top, if you remember the tabs under the add-ins tab, these are the presenter toolbars. Now if we go to products, the second one from the bottom is install FX presentation. Now if you remember from an earlier lesson, what we talked about was when we work with the presenter tools, you can export as an FXP file. Now this is a collection of data required to move all your assets from one machine to another. So what I've done is I've created an FXP file and given it to you to install so you get access to all the same files. So if we now open up the first of the lessons, which is the Positional Blend lesson, you'll see a list of the assets that will be dropping in. There's the theme, which is the grey spinning background in the back. There's the insert scene, which is the 3D insert scene that we've brought in from 3D Studio Max. And there's also the PowerPoint file, which is the interface and the visual positioning of the assets within the file. So if we just click on install, and you'll see it's opened up a rudimentary lesson just so we can see how some of these things operate. So if we go to the add-ins tab, first thing we can do is FX show, and if we go to single view, this is a preview of what we've created. So as you can see there, we have the theme, which is the spinning background in the background. We have the torus, which is the blue striped circular shape we have there, and we have a rotating pyramid inside. And then towards the right here, we've got three buttons. These are what we call blend action sets for blends. Now, a blend is effectively a bit like a magnet. So when we select position 1, it's kind of like pulling the pyramid into position 1. And if we select position 2, it pulls it to position 2. And if we go back to the original, it will pull it into position 1. Now the reason why you need to think of them as magnets is because they don't operate similarly to sort of Boolean logic, because we don't really know where the object is when we're starting to pull it. So if I start to pull it to position 1 and halfway through click on another object, it doesn't matter that it hasn't finished its first movement. It will just start pulling it from wherever it is in three-dimensional space. So this is quite a powerful tool and very, very logical when you start to get into the lesson creation. Okay, so if we escape out of that, if we escape out of that, and now I'll show you the 3D Studio Max used to create it. If you can see here, if I rotate it around, you can see there's the torus, and there's the rotating pyramid in the center. If I move the scrub bar, you'll see that the pyramid rotates, and there's no other animation involved. If I hide the grid, then you'll be able to see hopefully the dummies as well. So if we click on, the first thing we'll do is we just interrogate the pyramid. We click on the pyramid and we go to the curve editor. You can see there that it's got a rotational information from frame 0 to 100, and the information just carries on past the animated range, and that's obviously using the out of range types. So the out of range type is a relative repeat. So that effectively will mean that although we're just animating that pyramid from 0 to 100 frames, that rotation will carry on indefinitely within your lesson. Now the next thing we'll do is we'll go to the maxscript and open the user defined properties script. Now the first thing you'll notice is that it's got various different attributes. Action sets, pickable object, hyperlinks, bitmap, dynamic text, geometric text, camera stereo properties, shaders, that sort. So there's lots of functionality within the user-defined properties maxscript. The main thing that we're going to concentrate now is the action sets. The action sets are the scripts that we write into the user-defined properties of the objects to make them accessible within Presenter and PowerPoint. So for instance, if I right-click on one of the dummies in the scene, you'll see there in the user-defined properties there's a small amount of script. Now you can hand code all this script in, but what's obviously a lot easier is if you just use the tools in the maxscript. So if we want to get the properties of that dummy, if we go to get current action set properties, you'll see there that it's got certain attributes. Now the clip attributes is the position. As you can see there by the rollover, this is the attribute that controls triggerable positions. Obviously if we wanted a rotation, you'd click rotation. If you wanted to scale an object, you'd click the scale one. If you want to change its visibility, visibility, and if you wanted to blend from material to a different material, you'd click material. But at the moment we're concentrating on moving the pyramid from one position to another. So we've clicked the clip attribute of position. The next thing, if you scroll down, is we need to use blending. The radiator or the default position is yes. There is another way to linearly control assets. It's quite complicated, does require Boolean logic. It's more advanced than what you'll probably need to know to start with. So we'll concentrate firstly on the blends. Relative blending, that's if you were to move an object from position 1 to say position 2, if you had relative blending, every time you clicked on that action set, it would carry on using that same amount of positional movement in addition to its first movement. So for instance, if we had relative blending and we kept clicking go to position 1, it would just keep moving to position 1, and then it would move past position 1 in the same direction, the same amount, and keep going. The blend time is the amount of time required to get to that position. So for instance, when we clicked on position 1, it took exactly 1 second to go from the initial position to the second position. If we increase that to 2 seconds, obviously it will just take longer to get there. And equally, if obviously we reduce that blend time to half a second, it would move very quickly. The action set is effectively the name that we call the animation. So for instance, this action set I've called pyramid start position because it is the start position of the pyramid. If I was to click onto this one and get the current action set properties, this is pyramid position 1 and this is pyramid position 2. So these are the variables that are called within PowerPoint to activate or trigger your animations. Now these animations need a target. The clip target is the pyramid. So for instance, if we were to call the clip target the torus, if you can see up here torus 01, these same animations would happen, but they would happen with the torus. So effectively what you're doing is you're telling the action sets what objects within your scene to interact with. Okay, so these are all in there. If we now go to the XML exporter, now the XML exporter I've already pinned into my utilities. It won't automatically be there, and how you'd insert it there is if you click on more and scroll down your utilities, the FXML exporter will be in your list of utilities. You can either double click it there and click OK, or you can drop it into your utility browser here. Okay, now if we open the FXML exporter up, you'll see information about the theme pack and the theme name. These are if you were to author complete broadcast style graphic packages. Again, this is functionality that you don't really need to understand or don't really get to use, because what you're doing is just exporting simple insert scenes for interactive lessons. So the button that you really need to work with is the export scene button, and really concentrate on this lower dialog box. So the scene name here, which we're calling lesson 1, is the insert scene name, and when we go back into PowerPoint, that will be the insert scene that we pull into the lesson. And then we're also going to export it to a subfolder which we're calling projects. So if we hit the export scene now, you can see a small green sort of flash there. That's just literally telling you it's exporting. Obviously, the more complicated the scene with the more polygons, the more textures, the longer it will take. Obviously, this is quite a simple scene, so it instantly exports. Now, if we go back into PowerPoint, what we're going to do is we're going to start from scratch. So we're going to delete everything in the PowerPoint so you can see me build the presentation. If we go to FX Edit, we start with a blank slide, which is the moving background in the bottom there. We also have on the left hand side here the slide numbers. When you're creating lessons, you can have multiple slides, as many as you want. And then the tabs across the top here are themes. The 3D-Hub theme, which we've currently selected, is the grey one there. The variation, if you were to insert a video, you'd want to blank the background so that when we created a presentation, there wasn't any additional overheads with the background running at the same time. So if you were to insert a 3D video and want it full screen, we would recommend going to a blank variation. You can have an oscillating background or a static background. Now these are images that you can place within the presentation. So for instance, if you've seen some of our lessons, for instance, if you open up the bathroom tap, you'll see that there's a bathroom image in the back of that lesson. So if you're a company and you wish to brand your lessons, that you can obviously use that placeholder to put a branded background behind your lesson. We're going to stick with the default one at the moment, and we're going to go to insert, and we're going to insert the scene. So if you remember, within the inserts, our directory was projects, and then within there, lesson 1. So if we include lesson 1, and you can see that's dropped in there straight away. Now if you want to see what that looks like full screen, if you click on the buttons at the bottom here, number 1 will start full screen trial show from slide 1. Clicking the FX1 will start the full screen on the slide position you're at. So if you had multiple slides in here and you clicked on slide 3 and you hit FX, it would open up that slide in full screen. Obviously we've only got one slide, so either buttons will open in full screen. So we're just going to click on the first one, and you can see there, this is the 3D Studio Max representation of what we created. Obviously there's no buttons, so the interaction won't work. So we'll just escape out of that. And if I click OK, you'll see that the insert scene has got a blue box in the background with the insert scene number and also what the insert scene is called. We can change that to a graphical positional object by going back into the insert, and then towards the bottom there, custom stand-in. You can choose one if you already have one rendered out from 3D Studio Max. If you click the alpha channel like a PNG file, that will import it with the alpha channel. What I'm going to do there is use the custom stand-in, the grab command. Click OK. You can move it into any position you want, and if you press the insert button on your keyboard and if you press escape, you'll see there next time I click OK, you have a graphical representation of that object. Now that really is a true placeholder. If I was to scale the object down and go into FX Edit, you'll see that that's also scaled down in the visual in the trial preview. So if we go to insert, you can see there that the horizontal and vertical scale has been changed. Again, if you can move it, you can change the scale of it, and you can maximize it. So we're going to maximize it so it's the original position. So that's effectively bringing in the 3D Studio Max insert scene into your PowerPoint. And the next thing we need to do is to add some functionality, add the buttons that control those action sets. So we'll go to Advanced Slide Options, and that brings up a dialog box. The controls that we're most interested in are the dynamic UI controls, the ones at the bottom here. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create buttons. So we'll click on the Insert button, and it will ask for a control ID. This is just a name to call it so that we know what the button is in the PowerPoint, and also, so for instance, so the first button we're going to create is the starting position. So starting position. Now, I'm not going to give it a command because we're going to use the interactive dialog boxes to add the commands at a later time, but I do know that I need to give it a graphical representation. So the graphical representation, I'm going to choose from the buttons I've got choosing. I'm going to use the play button here. You can create your own buttons or select from the ones that we have already in the theme. So if I click the insert button here, you'll see that it's produced a button, and if I zoom in, you'll see that it's actually called its starting position. So I'm just going to reduce the size of the text. If I go to the align text, more options, you can stop the text from wrapping. If we go back to there, it will say starting position. Okay, and if we zoom out, we'll just position that over to one side. Oops, too much. We'll position it over to one side. So that's the starting position button. We're going to repeat this process. So go to add-ins, slide options, create another button. This one we're going to have is position 1. We're just going to call it position 1. The button we're going to choose is the play button 1. And the last one, position 2. And for that button, we're going to choose position 2. Okay, so now we've got the 3 buttons. We need to link these buttons to the animation that we've programmed into the 3D Studio Max file. So if we go back to FXEdit and we select the full screen preview mode, you'll see the buttons are there, and when you click on them, nothing happens. The reason why nothing happens, obviously we've not told them what to interact with. So the first thing we'll do is if you hold Control down and select a button, it will bring up a dialog box. It will tell you the control ID of the button that you've already produced, so we instantly know this one's the starting position. We've obviously pre-selected what the bitmap should be, but again we could change that from within here. And the most important thing is we're now going to give it a command. So if we select the button at the end there, it will bring up a command editor. Now we can type the commands in here if you can remember what the commands are, or a much more efficient and less time consuming way is to press the button at the bottom, which is action set command list. Now that has got all of the action sets that we programmed into the 3D Studio Max. So pyramid start position was one of the action sets, so we're going to insert that and click OK. Update button. Now when we click on that, you can see that the mouse changes, so it has got an action set programmed to it. It doesn't do anything because it's moving it, or it's turning the magnet on to move it into its initial position. So hold Control down again, click on the next button, go to the action set list, and we want this to be position 1. Update button, and you'll see here when we click on it, it moves it to position 1. Click on the first one with the initial position, it moves it back again. Obviously position 2, nothing happens yet. Hold Control down, select it, add the command, position 2, click OK, update button. So now we've got position 2, position 1 and the initial position. And again, it's fully interactive, rotates around. So that's pretty much it. So what we've learned there, if we just have a quick recap, what we've managed to do is in 3D Studio Max, we've positioned dummies into locations. We've added the scripts to them. And what I'll quickly do is just show you how easy it is to change things. So let's pretend that the position for this dummy wants to be behind the torus. So that's position 1. And what we're going to do is we're going to make the time of the blend, just get the action set for that one, make the time for the blend to 3 seconds and hit apply. Now if we export that and go back into PowerPoint and run the process again, position 1 is a very slow movement behind the torus. Position 2, if you remember, is still over there, and that's the original position. So again, it doesn't need to know where the position is, so you can go straight from position 2 to position 1, and we know it's going to take 3 seconds to get there, or a starting position. Okay, so that's the positional blends. That's lesson 1. If you look on the YouTube site for 3D-Hub Player, you'll see some additional lessons on some of the other functions. What I will do though is just give you a quick demonstration of how to export the lesson that you've created into a format that you can open in the 3D-Hub Player. So we go back to the Add-ins tab, go to FX Edit, and across the top there you'll see a tab that says Publish. Click on Publish, and the two options at the bottom there are the publish to a standalone FXD file, which is the file format that 3D-Hub Player opens, or the publish to an FXP or an FX presentation file, which is the file format that you use to collect all the assets and move from one machine to another. So we're going to publish to an FXD file. That will bring up an asset inventory, which basically allows you to omit, include, or link the assets in the file. So if you had assets which were linked to URLs or online repositories, that you'd click the link and put the URL name in there. If you had something in there that you knew wasn't required, you could omit it if it was a large file and you knew it wasn't being used. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the default radio button position there is embedded, so it will embed all the assets into the FXD. The FXD file name, we're just going to give it a location. We're going to go to the desktop and go to the lessons folder, and lesson 1, position blend FXD. Hit save and hit publish. Okay, that's done. Click OK and minimize that and minimize all the other screens. Open up the 3D-Hub Player. If we navigate to the lessons folder, there you can see the lesson that we've created. If we open that and run that full screen 2D, all the interactions that we've put into the model will work. And obviously this is available in stereo 3D as well as obviously 2D, but at the moment obviously I'm talking to you in a 2D format. So if we hit escape, and that really is the first of the lessons. I hope you've learnt the basics there. Obviously there'll be more lessons to do with adding text, all the different types of action sets, but that's really the basics, and I hope you get on. The blend time is the amount of time required to get to that position.